Do I pass? A question that so many of us ask ourselves. Let's break down why the relationship so many of us in the trans community have with passing is complicated, to say the least. So what is passing? Let's get nerdy for a second. Taking a sociological definition from Anderson and colleagues, passing can be described as appearing to belong to a social group other than the one that society has dictated to the individual. So essentially, the idea is you may be part of and/or identify with a particular group, but the world around you may categorize you as belonging to a different group. Regarding gender and transgender people, we may hear things like, do I pass as a woman for trans women? Or do I pass as a man for trans men? Although I feel like, and this may be biased by my own experience, it likely is, I feel like this is a much more common question and issue for trans women than it is for trans men. And I would argue that the word cisgender is implied in these statements, and here's why. Cisgender is the default in society. It's what's considered the default, and what I mean by that is that we are expected to be cisgender from birth unless we tell the world otherwise. Sure, the word cisgender has only crept into popular dialogue and popular media in very recent years, so maybe the word cisgender would not always be used. But when we're born, we're expected to have a gender identity that aligns with our anatomy. The age-old idea of penis equals boy, vagina equals girl, anything outside of that, and people just get confused and want to act like that doesn't exist. When genitalia and appearance match identity, everything's good. But when they don't, people and society as a whole has a problem with that. Trans people are perceived to not meet those experiences of matches between anatomy and sex, sometimes regardless of how they present themselves or even if they've medically transitioned in any way. So the perception may not even match reality. But trans is associated with being different, and being different is often associated with something that is bad, wrong, or unwanted in many contexts. Passing as cisgender means that you are perceived to meet those societal expectations. For example, you identify as a woman, and the world sees you as the same. When it comes to passing, it matters how others see you, not whether you're actually transgender or cisgender. And because being perceived as cisgender grants you certain privileges that being perceived as trans does not, passing is often desirable. So you might be asking yourself, what's the problem with passing, or do I have a problem with the concept of passing? And it's complicated. Passing itself isn't the problem, in my opinion. It's the culture surrounding this concept of passing, which may sound like I'm arguing semantics here, but we can understand this if we look at the consequences of not passing. Say I don't pass as a woman to some random person out in the world because of my voice or my appearance or something else they just pick up in the interaction. This person may then see me as a man or something else entirely. Maybe they'll even use the harmful it descriptor instead of she pronouns or even he pronouns that is often associated with non-passing trans people. Because, there are people out there in the world, and many of us have probably encountered them, those people that think being trans is some sort of inhuman abomination. Obviously, it's not. In some of these cases, if I don't pass to this person, I may be seen as less than a cis woman, or even seen as a very effeminate man. These both go against gender expectations, and going against societal expectations makes people uncomfortable. People may then take steps to resolve that discomfort, which may involve just distancing from trans people. It may involve belittling them or mocking them, so being verbally abusive. It may involve misgendering them. It may even involve physical violence. The whole trans panic defense where I didn't know they were trans and now I do, and I was overcome by my emotional discomfort, therefore I shouldn't be held accountable for the things I said and physically did to said trans person. Passing, not surprisingly, can then serve as a form of safety, creating a pressure to pass. This pressure fuels things, again, like dating fears, asking ourselves, should I tell this person that I'm trans? Passing reduces the likelihood of discrimination in numerous contexts like housing, healthcare, employment, and again, dating. We probably want to be able to use public restrooms and other gendered facilities without fear of discrimination. Passing serves as this kind of bridge towards getting us closer to finding all safety in all sorts of forms. And then, obviously, striving to pass can come also from our desire to reduce our own dysphoria. We may identify one way and then feel that our body does not match that when we look in the mirror. Essentially, for many of us, we may feel that we don't pass to ourselves. Taking steps to try to increase our own level of passing can help reduce our dysphoria, or at least that's the intention. I can very easily say that I have a personal desire to pass as a woman, and that was a huge motivator towards things like HRT and having surgeries, and I'm much happier now. But I say this because the pressure to pass and seeing ourselves as non-passing, let alone others seeing us as non-passing, can have a huge negative impact on our mental health. So again, the problem with passing is this pressure, this societal pressure, expectation, not passing itself or having a desire to pass. The message often is that if we don't pass, we are less than. We're not worthy of love, safety, stability, or even just basic respect, even basic human rights. Passing, again, is this expectation. We shouldn't have to pass in order to be seen as worthy of just existing. Some of us are unable to pass, and some of us don't have a desire to pass. That doesn't make our identities any less valid. But until society kind of gets on the same page, that expectation of passing is going to remain. And I do realize that I'm fortunate to pass in at least some, if not many, contexts. Sometimes my voice, or my height, or even for some people, my Adam's apple may give me away. People may clock me, or at least cause people to be suspicious and take a closer look, maybe look at me under further scrutiny. They may not be like, that's not a woman, but they may be like, something's standing out about this person. I don't know what it is. But generally, I think I pass, or at least pass enough that most people assume that I'm a woman, or at least assume that I identify as a woman, even if they don't think I always quite look or sound like one. But I say this because of my own personal experience. I've been and still am asked enough times whether I'm trans, for me to question that I don't always pass. Sometimes people default to using they, them pronouns for me, which I definitely appreciate more than he pronouns, but, she matches my identity, not they. The he usually only happens in situations where people can't physically see me, like talking on the phone or going to the Taco Bell drive-thru or something like that. And one other thing I find particularly cringy is every time I see here's how to pass or tips to help you pass type of video on YouTube or elsewhere. Before you jump all over me for this, as I have already said in this video, I completely understand why people want to pass, and therefore also understand why people would make these videos and why people would watch these videos. I mean, I've definitely watched these videos before. But it makes me cringe because, again, we shouldn't have to have this sort of content in the first place, but again, those pressures and expectations. These videos are just an example of a mechanism that has the intention of helping people survive in a society that states that we don't deserve to survive unless we meet certain standards or expectations. The larger problem is obviously with society, and not with the people making these sorts of videos or just with trans people in general. And I'm sure some people get frustrated by conventionally attractive model-level trans women being the ones who are often making these how to pass videos. You know, not at all knocking trans women who are extremely passable. I'm very happy for them, and I'm happy for my ability to generally pass as well. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes these videos come off as a bit tone deaf, because physical characteristics, not just things like makeup, fashion, and mannerisms, factor heavily into passing. We are again expected to look a certain way to pass, and there are certain attributes that are read as masculine or feminine, and some of these videos do ignore the physical advantages that some people inherently have. Whether some of us are born with certain advantages in terms of things like height or bone structure or, you know, the width of our shoulders or something like that. Or again, having economic means to access various forms of medical transitioning, especially, you know, some of the most critical ones that people gravitate towards for passing, like hair removal and facial feminization surgeries. And speaking of some of these like privileges and advantages, you know, when you pass this test, your reward is increased privilege and safety. This is probably where outdated things like the real life test come from. You know, that gatekeeping measure where a trans woman would have to live their life as a woman for 6 or 12 or more months before getting access to things like HRT and surgeries. You know, that rigorous process designed to prove whether or not you're trans enough to transition. But you could probably imagine that passing the real life test is likely quite difficult if you don't have advantages already prior to medical transition that allow you to more easily pass as cisgender. You know, it reinforces the pressure to pass and even associates passing with how valid you are as a trans person, on top of placing trans people at even higher risks of discrimination and violence. All in all, passing is a privilege, at least with the way our society is currently set up. And because a privilege is not a right, not everyone has access to it. Not everyone has access to passing privilege. And I think this is a big reason why societal attitudes towards trans people and that expectation to pass in order to be deserving of rights and respect needs to change. As always, I would love to hear your reactions. What are your thoughts on the concept of passing broadly and this idea of a pressure to pass? What is your relationship with passing? You know, is it something that you strive for, something that's important to you? Or is it something that you don't really care about? Or is it even something that you do care about, but maybe you wish you didn't or didn't feel you had to care about it? You know, I'm asking all these questions because I do think that passing and our relationship with this concept can get very complicated. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Tipsy and I love you all. I think she's creeping in the corner over there. We both hope that you're staying as happy and healthy and safe as you possibly can given these tough times. If you have not done so already, please be sure to give this a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and notification bell. I love you all. Bye for now.